Hello, friends, and welcome to a very chilled, laid back, and I would say a bit subdued edition of the Andrew Canlon Show, the new podcast that hopes to be somewhat interesting and engaging and fun from an artist who often has off the wall ideas and just likes to kind of do things differently each time to sort of shake it up. And as you might notice, we're in what I affectionately have been referring to as Studio B, aka my bedroom, but also has the same podcasting capabilities. And, yeah, just wanted to kind of dress it down a little bit. I know that's a shocker if you know me at all. Um, the whole dress down thing is part of the package. But yeah, man, welcome back. Thank you all for streaming the first episode. I really appreciate all the kind words and the feedback and the engagement. It's been a lot of fun. And as you all know, or maybe don't know, I was in New York last week, and we had our Meet the Brands event at Trends, and it was just such an amazing time. Everything went really well, and it just, like I said, in one of the interviews that I did, it just gets better every time. And man, was that fun. I mean, shout out to Miss Yato, my buddy Joe Marr, aka Miss Yato, who made his electronic debut, killed it, absolutely slayed it. Boston Flowers, shout out Sam, the lead singer and guitarist, who let me come crash on his couch and play his house party. The rain spoiled the rooftop party, but we still had a great time playing a good old fashioned house show. So that was a lot of fun, man. And having him in that lineup and Chocolate Brown and Sagami, just just melting faces every single time they're up there. It's just awesome being a part of this group of artists. It's awesome to be able to do a show like this, and I want to get in there as well as an artist. I'm happy to work with Umzungu and put these shows together, and I find myself definitely wanting to be out there. I'm a performer, I think, first and foremost, so I think anytime I get a chance to get on stage, I usually have a good time. I try to bring something slightly different, slightly new. So I got to do that at Sam's on Saturday, and shout out Sam and Boston Flowers. You guys are amazing. You have so many friends who show up for you guys, and I'm excited to rock out every time I come to the city and see you guys. So that was a blast, and just so many cool experiences, and catching up with old friends, and walking around my old stomping grounds, and it just feels good. It feels good to be back, and to have really fun music projects to look forward to. And it's never a bad day when you're working on music projects. Oh, there goes the light. What do you know? Oh, shoot. Well, technical difficulties. Hold on one second. We said we were going laid back, so now you get the other lamp in the room. So, oh look, everything's going swimmingly, as you can see on episode 2. We are off to a great start. But anyway, all that matters is that you're here, that you're hopefully entertained by this. Hmm. Well, we're still rocking out. We're still rocking out. We're still having a good time. Yeah, man. And ever since I came back to Nashville, and got right back to work, it's been a lot of fun to just, work on some new material, and have some things happen on the side from a business perspective, musically, that could be really exciting, and some partnerships and whatnot, that some collaborations that could be really exciting. It's always, music is always a realm of possibilities that, you just never know what can happen. You just never know what projects are gonna actually come to fruition. And when something good happens, it's always a bonus. So you appreciate those moments and you appreciate those wins, and um, yeah, you just try your best. You try to put good work out there. You try to be intentional um, as much as you can, and I look forward to getting in the studio tonight when I'm done here, and really getting into a brand new recording and a potential video, a studio series video that I think is going to be interesting. I'm not really sure how I'm going to pull this one off, but I'm really excited to try something new. There's always a challenge, especially when you're recording in a location, and there are audio challenges, and there's noise in the environment and such. So, but I think it's gonna be fun. I'm excited to kind of blend some production elements with some live elements and just do something very spontaneous. It's going to be a cover tune. And this is what I can say. What I can say that many of you probably don't know this about me, but I don't know if I've ever. What is my hair doing? I don't even know what's happening right now. But yeah, you might not know. I've been a very big JT guy over the years. As in Justin Timberlake, he is one of my favorite artists, and it's interesting thinking back to the 90s because, obviously everybody knew NSYNC, but like, NSYNC I was not the target audience for NSYNC. Boy bands were for girls. So I had no idea that when JT went solo that, he was going to work with Timbaland. I actually didn't know who Timbaland was back then. And, that he was going to kind of establish a much different vibe. Kind of reminds me of what Harry Styles has become, since he's left One Direction. This guy has just become, a pop legend, and he's a great artist and very unique, and blends a lot of, classic styles with a lot of new um, instrumentation, and I think it just works. And I think, that Justified album, I kind of remember having the same feeling about, wow, this is like a mashup. There are pop elements, there's hip hop, there's R&B, there's soul, and there's just all these different genres blending together. And so I'm excited to let you know that I'm going to be doing a JT song. I'm going to be doing a cover for my next studio series video, and I'm pretty excited about it. I'm excited to get to work on it and start prepping and try to turn it into a live session and just see what happens. And I think the last time I did something like this was actually the Amalfi video, which, everyone loves. And I think that one, I'm very proud of that one. And, all the audio that you're listening to, I did all the production for it myself. And, I get a lot of compliments on that track and the vocal quality in that recording. So, yeah, I'm very proud of that one. And I'm going to aim for something similar here. With this latest edition of the studio series, which has been something that I look forward to doing. I would do it more often if I had the time. But life of an artist, you gotta still pay the bills and do other things. So, I am still working and paying the bills and doing all that stuff. But music has become much more of a priority thanks to YouTube. And like I said, I think there could be some fun things that are coming up around the corner. I don't want to kind of allude to anything right now. As we've just sort of recently dealt with contracts and whatnot, but yeah, hopefully I'll be able to announce projects as soon as they come out. I do have one co-writing project that I think I can say the release date will be May 8th. And, I'm going to definitely share about that collaboration because it's a long time coming. This one in particular goes back a long way. I think I can say how long ago it was that we first wrote this song together. It would have been, man, probably 2014. And when this particular artist let me know that they were still interested in releasing the song, I was really shocked but pleasantly surprised and happy to, of course, be a part of it and be a part of an album and whatnot. I don't want to say too much, but yeah, happy to be a part of a project outside of my own project, right? It's always great to have collaborations. I think you just kind of want more of that as an artist. You as a collaborator, you just you want to work with other people. You want to create sounds that are unique and just kind of keep surprising yourself and surprising other people. Getting into the studio with other artists is always, special. And we've really formed a bit of a collective in New York and here in Nashville. There's definitely something building as well. There's, of course, the Creative Pulse people and a great community of indie artists as well that are here doing things outside of the country space that I think are really exciting. So I look forward to blending more styles, and I look forward to kind of doing more mashups, possibly even doing more covers. It is a lot of fun to do covers, and I have been pretty selective about doing them, because I want to do them justice. And I think some of these songs are so ingrained in people's minds that, it kind of feels like, trying to repaint the Mona Lisa or something. Like, just leave it alone. You don't need to mess with it. And I can think of some remakes that I don't think are that great, but I can think of some other ones that are actually really good, and some that I even favor more so than the original. So covers can be cool, and they can work, and audiences can really appreciate an artist's take on someone else's song, on someone else's material. And yeah, I just think it's super cool. I think it's super cool when you have the opportunity to do something like that, to kind of step into someone else's style and genre and kind of play with it and experiment and try to put your stamp on it without completely reinventing the wheel. So that's always a bit of a tightrope that you walk with covers, and you want to be respectful, of course, to the artist who wrote it, but you also want to be yourself as a performer and do it in a way that you can be proud of, right? And being in charge of the production, kind of double ending the process, you want to make sure that you give yourself the opportunity to make solid edits and solid production choices. Because much of this will be done on my own, and I think it'll be great. I've done some other fun, spontaneous things by the water in Queens, and obviously the Italy video and some of the studio series videos, which have been in studio. And that's the whole idea, is that the studio can be a proper one that lives in a stationary space, or it can be anywhere. It can fit into my briefcase, and I can take it with me on the road and really create some new material and just base it on the vibe around me and whatever the settings are, whatever the atmosphere is, I can create in that atmosphere, and try to curate the sound based on the environment as much as possible. And it's just given me a new lease on life to be able to adapt my sound to the world around me and kind of challenge myself to do things that still sound polished in environments that maybe aren't so polished, and not get hung up too much on the minutia of production. Just let it fly. Trust your instincts. Trust your ears. Don't be a production asshole and start kind of saying, well, you didn't actually use Melodyne, or you didn't use Pro Tools, so it's not actually legitimate. Like, I think what I learned at Juilliard, which is incredibly helpful, and my professor, his name is Nathan Perliman, and he was incredible. Great educator, great producer, great musician. And he had a very straightforward approach to recording, which was, if it sounds good, it is good. And I think that's something that he actually was taught. If I remember correctly, I think that's one of the stories that he told, was that his professors at Juilliard kind of echoed that. And I think that if you run that up the chain, it doesn't matter how decorated you are in the music business. If you've been doing it long enough, what you understand is as long as you're capturing good sounds, the end result will be there, when you need it to be there. It's going to sound great. It's going to sound the way that you want it to sound. If you trust your process and you write it and you program it and you mix it and you master it in a way that you're happy with, um, knowing that, this is what my audience expects from me as well, or maybe they don't. Maybe it's something new. Um, and those risks can be fun too. They can be scary, but they can be fun. So you just want to kind of give yourself the opportunity and the space to do some different things, to take some chances. You can always lean on your old tricks, to get you through to the next project. And I've tried not to allow myself to do that. I know that there are some producers out there who have templates and, like to mix to a template. And I know that that can be a way to kind of expedite certain things. And I respect that, especially if you're doing commercial work. And I think certain things do need to be expedited. But for an indie guy like myself, or any recording artist really, who, is trying to create sounds that are familiar as sort of your trademark. Sorry, I don't know why my nose is so itchy. This is weird. I'm not picking my nose, but this is just like an itchy thing. Okay. Okay, we're good. We're back. But anyway, I told you, we're just being ourselves. We're just being ourselves. This is a very spontaneous episode. And yeah, my nose was itchy. So anyway, yeah, I just try to keep the process light and breezy and try not to get hung up on the details, because no one cares about the details. And that's not to say that you shouldn't focus on them, but it is to say, um, you know, if you have to improvise, then that's what you do. Because in my experience, using a template approach doesn't always work. And it doesn't always work because that's not always what's needed. What's needed is a custom approach, is something that is going to be applied on the spot, but applies to your session, applies to your song. So yeah, I think those things are important, to not just treat every track the same way. Oh, I've got to level it. I've got to put these compressors on before I even open a plugin or plug in my guitar or start singing. I think that that's always kind of a no-no. Like in my opinion, in my process, that would be like, I just wouldn't do that. I would wait until I record something and then start putting, EQs and compressors on the sounds. Because I don't know. I think each sound is unique, and I think you need to give each sound attention. And now, then there's always, I can hear the producer community just screaming at their screens right now. Like, dude, I get it. Like, there are buses and you can make things more consistent and you can tie sounds together and everything can sound glued together. And I get that. And I think there's a way to also glue all of those sounds together without using one tool. You can use a combination of tools to make things blend. And I think that that's something that I enjoy doing. That's something that I enjoy doing. I think one of the challenges of production that I really enjoy is not focusing so much on the dBs, not focusing so much on the waveforms, and the more sort of, I guess, binary and technically driven terminologies about production. I usually go with my gut and what I know. I guess you could call it music theory, but when I'm programming, an increase in volume and then a decrease in volume, you basically have to code these things in Logic, and that's any DAW really. That's any computer music making platform. Which, that's so weird that that's turned off. But anyway, um, yeah, it's kind of consistent across the board. In terms of the tools that are available. And I think the one thing I get sort of frustrated about, the narrative that I find not awesome about music making today, is that it's not worth as much because so many people can do it, and it's not as difficult to do it as it once was. This is an issue for me. Like, I understand that the masses now have access to music production equipment. Is it easier now? No, not if you're making things from scratch. If you're borrowing, if you're sampling everything, if you're just kind of copying and pasting, it's easy. Sure. And there's a lot of that stuff out there. Now, does the audience care whether or not something was made from scratch or that it was a copy and paste job? Probably not. But I think you need to speak to your audience as though they care, because there are audiences out there that do, and I think my audience cares. I think my audience are active listeners. Those are the people that I want listening to my music, you know? Like, I want people who are attentive, who care about those details, who care about performance in electronic music, to listen to my songs. And anyone that is just kind of in it for the spectacle, or because, I don't know, maybe it's a popular record or something, like, I really don't care for that. I'm interested in listeners who care as much about the music as I do, and I try as hard as I can to give people sounds and dynamics that will appeal to active listeners, people that will get dialed in on, some texture in the sound, some sort of ear candy. People who will want to know which synths that I use, which plugins that I use, which compressors, which EQs. Like, these are things that I could share with you. And I am not as much of a gearhead when it comes to production as many people out there are. I'm really purely interested in using these tools in a way that will make my recordings more expressive and more lifelike. And so I engage with music production much differently. I engage with it purely as a vessel to accomplish the sounds that I'm looking for, because I used to play these things myself, and I think, even as a bandmate years ago, I'm still writing all the parts. I'm still kind of the front guy, and it's all of my material. So, now it's cool to be able to do it all myself. Is it easy? Hell no. Hell no. Would it be easier if, more things were automated? Of course, but you want to try to limit the amount of automation that you're relying on, because I think if you get too comfortable, taking the easy road, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for you to step out on stage and try to replicate what you do in the studio. And you want to isolate as much of those performance elements as you can and just plug those into your show, and keep it as performative as possible, because I believe that ticket buyers deserve to see musicians perform on stage and not just kind of wave at the crowd and just let a track run in the background. I understand that there's still elements of that as part of my process, and I try to limit that as much as I can, and I'm still learning. This current iteration of my live show is probably, I don't know, maybe a couple years old at this point, and there hasn't been time to really, create new things to worry about as I'm, performing out there. There have been a lot of things that have been in the way in life that, that have limited my ability to expand on my live sets. For example, my MPC took on some water damage over the summer and is out of commission. So, I was really excited about that instrument, and it was a crucial part of my process. And then, suddenly, a $900 piece of equipment is just sitting there, in need of repair. So, things happen and you have to pivot and adjust, and I've tried my best to do that, and I feel like it's panning out. And I think the process of engaging with people on a personal level, just to let them know how I'm doing, and to just sort of take that first leap of faith in engaging with the community online that hopefully is interested in my music and also my well-being. There are so many things you can do to help me accomplish a lot of these things, and you're already doing it if you're watching any of this content, if you have followed along on Instagram. YouTube and Instagram are really my primary places I like to engage online, and of course you can always find things on the streaming platforms. And hopefully streaming will become more equitable in the future. I think it's a real lost opportunity to reward artists for, Herculean efforts to get their material out there, published, and shared, on streaming platforms. I keep thinking to myself, if they would give us even 50% per stream, or 50%, 50 cents per stream, how much that would mean, financially. And, that's not what's happening. I mean, it's just criminal when you look at the decibels on the spreadsheets, and you look at just the how watered down things have become, how difficult it is to kind of cut through the noise, and a lot of material that may be good or may not be good. It's there are just too many choices for consumers these days, and just far too many of us doing this on a DIY basis for it to be, I think, truly fair across the board, or even balanced. I think at this point it's hard to say, but it needs to be fixed. No doubt about it. It's a completely broken system. Anytime people are paying a subscription and artists are, uploading their material, I do think, the numbers should be, more consistent. I understand it's challenging, but I also think that by stacking the deck against, independent artists so early on in the process, in the creation of all of these platforms, we've really seen a breakdown of profitability on the artist end. So it's just a really rough reality of doing this work, and kind of having to rely on multiple avenues to be able to earn and live. And touring is something that I've always wanted to do. A lot of my friends have done it, and that's something that has not come to fruition, but I'm optimistic about the prospect of doing that in the near future. And I've kind of done local stuff, and what I would call local tour. In New York, I did a good run of shows over the summertime, and I kind of coined that as my New York City tour, and that was fun. So yeah, any chance I have to get out there and perform in front of people, that's always my priority. But of course, a lot of the stuff you see me do online is to kind of try and really expedite the process of getting my music seen and heard, in a way that I can still be proud of, and in a way that I feel, I can kind of present myself in a way that is real and raw at times, and authentic, and certainly not perfect, but hopefully of a certain quality, because I'm always aiming to do great work at the end of the day. That's all I want to do. I just want to do great work. As a musician, I'm always challenging myself to try new things, and to kind of overcome my fears of, being laughed at, or being embarrassed about, people maybe not liking what I do, or thinking that it's corny. I still think about that, so it's you just kind of press on. I think I never imagined that I'd be in the business of content creation, but here we are, and it's a brave new world for me, and there's a lot to be excited about that I will hopefully be able to report to you soon, as the release dates, like I said, are around the corner. And yeah, there's some new material on the horizon, and that's always fun. It's always fun to put new music into the world, whether that's an Andrew Canlon original or that's a cover tune. I look forward to sharing every single time, and I look forward to keep on keeping on, I guess you could say. I don't know. Yeah, like I said, this was a very spontaneous catch up, a little fireside chat for you. And I hope you enjoyed it. And maybe I'll comb my hair next time. That seems like a good idea. It's looking a little wild these days. I don't know what is going on, but it's a savage garden right now. It's doing weird things. It's got a life of its own. I don't know. Anywho, thank you guys for being here. Thank you for hanging out. I like I said, I'm excited to share with you shortly some announcements, as it were. And shout out to the Trends crew, shout out to Umzungu. Um, like I said, I'm super excited about what Casey and I are building. I'm stoked to continue to work with all of our Tunes and Brews alumni at this point on future projects. I think there's a really amazing kind of community of artists that is being formed, and it's Grace and Sasha, myself, Mzungu, Chocolate Brown, Boston Flowers. We've got some really cool friends and some really talented people in our circle, and it's a cool little musical family band of misfits that's been formed, and I mean that in the coolest possible way, man. Grayson and all the rest of the acts that we've had, Self Perpetual, and the list goes on. And hopefully we can bring more artists in. Masiato, of course, who killed it in his debut, Sagami. These are, great people and super talented artists, and artists that I'm happy to work with and continue to kind of grow and see where this all takes us. And I'm also excited to replicate that here in Nashville as well, and throughout the country. The possibilities are seriously endless. So thank you for being here, and for believing in the dream. And I will let you go. Enjoy your evening, and we'll be back soon with more music content.